All right, Irigaray, introduction. Okay, so Irigaray is our last author, right? And it's about time we have a woman in a class on love, right? And so we're going to learn a little bit. This is going to be an exciting work for both men and women. If you're a woman, you're going to finally have a kind of access into what it means to be a woman, what it means to love like a woman. So, you know, we live in a male-dominated world. We are taught often to live as males, right? We learn to inhabit the world in a male way. And we have never really been taught, right? How do you dwell in the world like a woman, right? So this is going to be an interesting text for women. When I first read Irigaray, it was like, it was like a whole world was opened that I had vaguely sensed, but it just, she said it, right? She spoke it clearly. And men in the room, this will be a very good text for you also. If you've always struggled with knowing what women want, right? There's even a movie on this. What do women want? Or what women want? You will really be able, through this text that we're about to read, to enter the female psychology, right? What do women need? How do they need to be loved, right? How do you best express love to a woman, right? So this is fascinating text, I think, for both males and females, and I'm happy to be doing it with you. So let's do a little bit on who Irigaray is. Unfortunately, there's not much on her because she's still alive. And I haven't been able to get any juicy gossip on her either. I've looked, so I have no idea about her love life. I don't have as much as I had when I told you about Kierkegaard, for example, right? But I'll give you what I have. 1932 is her birth. She's still alive, so she must be in her 90s. She has an Italian name, Luce, right? So, but she was born in Belgium, and she studied and taught in France, right? So her work is in French. She has a degree in psychology and philosophy. That's all I got on Irigaray. It's very sad. By the way, I'll give extra credit to whoever gives me some gossip on Irigaray. I'm ready for that. All right, let's talk a little bit about feminism, because she is our first feminist philosopher. So we have to learn a little bit about this movement, and also so that we can situate her within the whole trajectory of feminism, right? So feminism has three main waves. You have the first wave, the second wave, the third wave, and a new trend called womanism. Now, as I explain these waves, I'm going to give you some texts, some examples, right? And I invite you, right, if you feel like the person sounds interesting, get the book, read it. This is a kind of introduction to feminism, right? Feminism in 15 minutes. 18, I see on my computer. So if any of these works seem interesting, go and read them, right? I really encourage you. Okay. So first wave feminism is all about equality. Okay, so for centuries, right, philosophers taught, I mean, religious teachers taught that the woman is inferior, there's something wrong with her, and she needs the man to control her, right? I mean, you have this idea as early as Aristotle's philosophy, right? I want to talk a little bit about Aristotle because he's fascinating, right? I talk about Aristotle rather than some more ancient texts like the Bible, for instance, because Aristotle influenced the readership of the Bible, right? So he influenced the way we read these ancient scriptures. And so he's really the first one that we need to look at, right? So Aristotle has a really interesting theory on men and women. And he says basically this. He starts with a difference between physical differences, right, between males and females. And on that part, he's correct, right? He says the males have a hotter body temperature and the females have a colder body temperature. That's true. But then he begins to interpret and go deeper, and this is where he loses me a little bit. So he says this, because the males have a hotter temperature, they're more spirited. He uses this expression. Let me write this down. More spirited. In other words, they have more spirit, more energy. And so because they have more energy, they're more capable of controlling themselves, controlling their passions, right? And so they're less morally depraved. The woman, on the other hand, because her body temperature is cooler, she is less spirited, right? Let me write this down. In other words, she has less energy, and so she's less able to control her passions. So she's going to fall into temptation more. She's going to make moral mistakes more because has less energy to control herself, right? Now, because of this difference of energies, the male is also better structured, better built to lead. And the woman is better structured and better built to follow. So the male should have authority over the female, right? So after this, all of philosophy and theology follows after Aristotle. You see the same idea in philosophers that the woman they say that the woman is more connected to the body, right? Woman is more physical, more sensuous. Man is more intellectual. I'm trying to write this down. I wish it would work. Intellectual. I can't write intellectual. Intellectual. He is more rational, right? So this distinction, this is an Aristotelian distinction, right? That and so everyone has followed this, right? From theology to philosophy, people are saying this about the woman, therefore is inferior morally, physically, and the man has to rule over her, has to dominate or have authority over her. So first wave feminism is responding to Aristotle and everyone after him, right? Saying, no, we are the same, they say. There's no difference. Even if there is a kind of physical difference, intellectually, morally, we are the same. That's the emphasis, right? So the first one who wrote on this, I mean, you have women in the Middle Ages writing about this, right? But in the 18th century, you have the first long work on this. This is Wollstonecraft, who wrote A Vindication of the Rights of Women, right? So this is 18th century, right? This is the first attempt of the woman to demonstrate, to prove that the woman is equal to the man intellectually and morally, something which wasn't, obvious before that. You also have in that context somebody like Betty Friedan, who wrote The Feminine Mystique. This is an American philosopher. She's talking about how shall I put it, the horrors of being a housewife, right? So she's basically, she's writing in the 50s, right? When the woman was, supposed to be at home and not have a career because, of course, because she's not intellectual and more physical, therefore she should be with the kids, right? Same Aristotelian argument. And so she basically bemoans in that book the horrors of suburban wife situation, right? And she's seen her longing, right, for a career, for using her brain and so forth. So she's also first wave, right? I think Simone de Beauvoir, definitely first wave. This is one of the most famous French feminists, right, who wrote The Second Sex. And in that book, this book, The Second Sex, was a difficult read for me because it was a long lament on how dreadful it was to be a woman, right? To be stuck in a woman's body and not be able to get as far as her spouse, right, who was male. And so she is really complaining about how in the world we live in, if we are a woman and attached to this female body, we're going to have a harder time getting ahead. So this is also first wave, where she's, really saying, I feel like I could succeed, but because I'm a woman, I feel like I'm held back, right, by society structures. Okay, so you get an idea. That's the first wave. So Now we get to the second wave, and we'll see that Irigaray is part of the second wave. So second wave is a backlash against the first wave, right? In first wave, women were saying, we're the same as the men, we can do this. You have the famous image, right, of the woman with the bicep. I don't have much of a bicep, but right? And so the second wave realizes that, no, we're different, and we should celebrate our difference. And true equality will not occur until the world not only accepts our difference, but welcomes it, right? The issue with the world is that, or the issue with first wave, is that the women thought, okay, we can do everything like the men. But then they realized as they entered the workforce that the world was not structured to receive a female body, right? With its own rhythms, with its urges. It's not built for that, right? As a woman and you enter the man's world, you have to sacrifice things, right? You either have to sacrifice your desire for a family, your desire for a child. To get ahead, you cannot be tied down like this, right? So there are many things that women had to sacrifice because the world is so hostile to the feminine body, the feminine desires, right? So second wave is saying, no, it's not that we are equal, we're different, but we need to make the world aware that it needs to be more welcoming of our difference. If there's going to be true equality, the world needs to open up and be more welcoming to the female body. In other words, I want to be an executive, but also a mother, right? Or I want to be a doctor, but also a wife, right? I don't want to sacrifice these aspects for my career. So several there. You have Irigaray, which we're going to see is a second wave. She's going to talk about the differences between male and female and how we need to honor those differences, how the female voice needs to be explored, heard, expressed, right? For there to be genuine civilization, right? She makes the case that this world will become civilized only when the male and the female voices are able to speak together, right? Not the female trying to be male, right? So when the male voice is able to speak, but also the female voice in its specificity, in its uniqueness, is able to speak and express itself and, you know, be part of society, then she says we will have a genuine civilization, we'll have balance, we'll have harmony in the society. Okay. Another one in this context is Carol Gilligan, who is more of a psychologist, but she wrote a book called In a Different Voice. And she's a psychologist, so she actually studies girls and boys in making moral decisions. So she puts them in front of a moral dilemma, and she analyzes how the girl thinks it through and how the boy thinks it through. She's working with children or teenagers. And so she noticed over and over again, right? This is really an experiment she's doing. So she's seeing many, many cases. She noticed that over and over again, the girls reflected on the moral dilemma differently than the boys. They had another moral reasoning, right? The boys reasoned a certain way and the girls reasoned another way. And so she showed, right, through her experiments that there is actual differences in the way that we think, in the way that we feel. We are not the same, right? Just with different shell of a body. Our emotions are different. Our intelligence is different, right? The way we make moral decisions is different. Okay, so that's the second wave, right? Third wave is where we are in now. This is the gender fluid wave, fluidity, right? This is third wave. So this is actually a backlash against second wave. This is the idea that, you know, why are we talking about women like they are all the same, right? And this is really the backlash operated by lesbian women, right? They said, well, you second wave people started to define what it is to be a woman. And interestingly, it's always in relationship with a man. We don't fit in that category. What about us? Are we not women too? Right? So this is a broadening, right, of what it means to be a woman beyond the heterosexual, beyond the heteronormative, right, To be a woman doesn't mean to be with a man. Could mean something else, right? So this is, for example, the main person there is Judith Butler with her book Gender Trouble. And she makes interesting argument in that book, so we know already that gender is constructed, meaning, you know, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man, right, is a construct by society. She goes further and she says sexual difference is a construct. In other words, the fact that we divide the world in male and female, society taught us to do that. We don't have to see the world in this way. We can just see the world full of people who are equal, all different, but not in this specific way, right? So she says, if we come to a society where we don't have this distinction male-female, she believes we will not have the problem of oppression that we have today. So she's looking at a kind of gender, like you have colorblind, you have gender blind world, right? For her, a gender blind world would be a world freed of oppression. Good, so I'm gonna stick with those three waves because I have 10% left. So let me talk briefly about Irigaray and To Be Two, so you have an idea what you're getting into. So the book is second wave, right? She's going to be talking about the importance of celebrating the difference of being a woman and so forth. But this is also a beautiful book about reconciliation between the male and the female, right? So it's not just about the woman finding herself, it's also about the woman finding herself in order to be in a relationship, right? So she's different from many feminists in that she doesn't see the male as the aggressor or the enemy, right? She doesn't see the woman as the victim, right? She sees the male as simply missing a part, having blind spots, right? She says the male cannot truly rule the world without the female, right? In other words, she is working towards the reconciliation between the male and the female so that we can have a more balanced approach to the world. In other words, what she's trying to do is bring this balance into all aspects of life. Males and females should be equally represented in medicine, in theology, in philosophy, in government. Once we have this equal representation, she believes we will have a balanced world, right? So that's why for her, it's crucial to work at reconciliating the male and the female so that they can be in relationship and work together towards this kind of balance, right? So in the book that we're going to be reading, she's going to talk about the sexual relationship, right? She's going to hone in on that aspect, this type of relationship with the male, between the male and the female. And she's going to talk about the fact that for centuries, right, we have civilized the world, but we have not civilized the inner life, right? We are great at building things, but when it comes to relationships, we are primitive, right? This is one of her big issues, right? She says, we've really conquered the world, but we are still not able to sustain a relationship which lasts between the male and the female. And so the whole book, To Be Two, is a manual. It's a toolbox meant to give us the skills to create this relationship, to refine and cultivate this relationship so that we're not just, you know, out there building things, we're also able to sustain relationships which ultimately create balance, right? So in the text we're going to read, right, we'll talk about how to do that, what are some of the skills we need, and she's going to focus, of course, on the sexual relationship, right? And for her, right, sex is something which we all talk about in the media and so forth, but none of us really do it in an artful way, right? She's saying we lack an education on sexuality, and it's very true, right? We'll talk about that. And so this book or this text that we're going to read is really meant to be the beginning of an education. How do we relate to each other sexually in a way that is cultured, refined, sophisticated, artistic, beautiful, and not just whatever happens, right? So that will be the first text. And then the second text will emphasize one of the most important skills in a relationship, which is the art of silence. So we'll be talking about that too. Okay, any questions? Are you guys still there? Yes, okay. Any questions? Anything you want to add? All right. I'm going to stop the recording.